Gettysburg and Vicksburg, two crucial Union victories ultimately altering the entire course of the American Civil War. We will delve into the causes, effects, strategies, important events, and influential figures of these turning points in history. The year is 1863, and the Civil War was in full effect. Washington, D.C. was held by the Yankees, and the South needed to find a weak point in the Union's immense control. General Robert E. Lee had thought that he had found this weak point in the military equipment storage fortress in Camp Curtin near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, as the Union Army was defending the White House. He sent nearly his entire army toward his goal location, attempting to destroy all military outposts along the way in Maryland and Pennsylvania. Some of the Union force eventually found out about this event and met the Confederate Army in a skirmish at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The Battle of Gettysburg was one of the most influential turning points in the Civil War. Consequently, it was also one of the bloodiest battles fought. The battle resulted in over 46,000 casualties between both sides and ultimately resulted in a crushing defeat of Confederate forces. The Confederate Army was led by General Robert E. Lee, while Union forces were led by General George G. Meade. Lee hoped to attack the North directly and led his army into Pennsylvania. The location of Gettysburg made it a gateway into the North, and thus an important objective for the Confederate Army. Lee was cautioned against engaging the Union Army by his second-in-command, James Longstreet. Lee, however, saw it necessary to attack right then and there, and he ignored Longstreet's warning. Lee responded to Longstreet with words that would later become famous: "The enemy is there, and I am going to attack him there." The battle began on July 1st with Lee's initial assault. The battle raged on for 3 days. By the end of the first 2 days of fighting, the death toll was approximately 35,000. The Confederates were losing the fight, but both sides fought long and hard. On July 3rd, when Lee realized that he had to create a break in the Union's defenses, he ordered Pickett's charge. Fought at Cemetery Hill, it was a vain attempt to pierce the Union lines. While it was semi-successful, led to an extremely large number of Confederate deaths. The Confederate Army ultimately was hurt the most by Pickett's charge. On July 4th, Lee withdrew his forces and retreated. In response to his failure, Lee offered his resignation to Confederacy President Jefferson Davis, but Davis rejected the resignation and allowed Lee to remain in service. Longstreet would later call Gettysburg the ground with no value, referencing while the battle was fought at Gettysburg, it was not fought for Gettysburg. Robert E. Lee was arguably the most important figure in the Battle of Gettysburg. Lee is considered to be one of the greatest generals in the American Civil War despite his shortcomings. Lee was the son of a Revolutionary War hero. He graduated from West Point Academy in 1829. He served during the Mexican-American War and had risen to the rank of colonel by the end of this conflict. Lee's reputation as one of the finest officers in the United States military grew over time, and in 1861 he was offered command of the Union Army by President Abraham Lincoln, but declined, stating that he had an obligation to fight alongside the South. George G. Meade was another important figure at Gettysburg. He was the general of the Union Army that fought against Lee's forces. As a child, Meade came to America from Spain after his family was ruined by the Napoleonic Wars. He graduated from the U.S. Military Academy and served briefly in the Seminole War. In 1863, he was given command of the Union Army and held off Lee's attacks at Gettysburg. However, he received harsh criticism from Lincoln for not finishing off the crippled Confederate army when he had the opportunity. At the dedication ceremony for the cemetery at Gettysburg after one of the bloodiest conflicts of the American Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln gave an incredible 273-word speech that would be so powerful as to be known as one of the most powerful speeches in American history, known as the Gettysburg Address. He discussed equality among people and related the Declaration of Independence to the Civil War sacrifices. Many white slave owners believed that the Constitution was the best guide for an American man because slavery is not mentioned, but Lincoln believed that the Declaration was the true principles an American should relate to, as it says that all men are created equal. He started off his 2-minute speech with words about the birth of their new nation and the fathers who founded it. He discussed the fact that the Civil War, the bloodiest war in American history, was a testament to if the Union was strong enough to survive. Sure enough, the Union's ideas of self-government had been implemented as the North came out on top at the end of the war. Summer, 1863, Southwest Mississippi. The South controls the town of Vicksburg, a crucial point for control of the Mississippi River. Located near the mouth of the river, Vicksburg is also on a slight hill. Union Major General Ulysses S. Grant, born Hiram Ulysses Grant in Point Pleasant, Ohio, is trying to take control of this town and ultimately the Mississippi River. If the Union obtained this, it would split the Confederacy in two and isolate their primary source of soldiers, Texas. Lieutenant General John C. Pemberton, born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, was the leader of the Confederates at Vicksburg. In order to capture Vicksburg, Grant decided to first capture Jackson, the capital. This maneuver allowed the Union to surround Vicksburg and cut off their supplies. He marched his army towards Arkansas, 30 miles south of Vicksburg, and marched to Jackson. Grant succeeded, took Jackson, and surrounded Vicksburg. Pemberton was in the middle of a countermatch, meaning that his wagons were leading his army. In addition, Grant knew that he would be scaring and surprising the unsuspecting soldiers that were there. When the fighting started, there were no fields on which to have a trench battle with artillery, but rather trees and woods, leading to skirmishes between smaller companies. When Pemberton got word of the Union attack, he sent troops to Jackson Road, the road to Vicksburg, and to try and cut the Union army off. They were handily defeated when Grant sent some of his best soldiers under the command of John Blackjack Logan to outflank the Confederate army. The Confederates had to retreat twice because Logan's hardened men chased them back farther after their first retreat. Eventually, the Union captured the road to Vicksburg. To combat this, the Confederates hatched a plan to smash a hole in the weakest part of the Union line they could find. This plan was executed in vain, as the Union line did not open. Once the battle came to open field encounters, Grant amazingly won 5 of them in only 16 days, which, in addition to cutting off supply lines, crushed the Southerners' morale and manpower. Grant then launched a major siege on Vicksburg on May 25th, and after holding out for 47 days, Pemberton was forced to surrender on July 4th due to lack of supplies and loss of men. Grant and the Union Army victory at Vicksburg was stunning and helped immensely in Grant's later election as president. The statistics of this battle are amazing. There were 110,000 soldiers engaged total, with 77,000 Union and 33,000 Confederate. Of those soldiers, the Union had 606 killed, 3,940 wounded, and 164 missing or captured. The Confederates had one less death and almost half the wounded at 1,938. However, they had 29,620 missing or captured, most of which were captured in the surrender. This loss of men, supplies, and morale was felt throughout the South and was only amplified by the Confederates' loss at Gettysburg at the same time. As Robert E. Lee's army was obliterated to less than two-thirds of what it used to be, the dreams of defeating the North in Union territory fled as options. Gettysburg would be the farthest north that Lee would ever reach. He marched his men back to Virginia after suffering intense defeat to the north. Although Lee would win small battles here and there, nothing would outweigh the combined influence of Gettysburg and Ulysses S. Grant's victory at Vicksburg. The intense loss of confidence Robert E. Lee led him to offer his resignation to Jefferson Davis, to which he was refused. All of the lost casualties and supplies that the Confederates could not regain led to, ultimately, the South's defeat in the American Civil War.